it well. Played it very, very, very well indeed.
No more slices for you.
Oh, look at that for judgment.
You'll learn.
Hi everyone, welcome to Sliced. Big fortnight coming up with the Scottish Open and the Open Championship to come. But first, if you haven't already, I recommend checking out our feed and listening to a Ryan Fox special, which we recorded last week. Ryan told us he was looking forward to playing North Berwick. I see today that he shot 64, so that's good. You can hear him talk about why he loves Portrush, why he thinks the Open's the best major for him, what he thinks of signature events, what he thinks of the 10 DP World Tour cards, everything really we could think to cram into an hour. And he was great company, Sam. So well done for arranging that. I don't think any less of Ryan now, and I feel like actually I think I'm over Canada because talking to the person who did that to me, it's made it all better. So
maybe we need to get Sam Burns on so you can chew the fat with him about it.
No, I'm still cross with him.
Okay.
Yeah, Ryan was great, wasn't he? All jokes aside, Ryan was great, and he was. He'll be very, very popular this week and next, I suspect.
Yeah, and if I'm allowed to have a little sort of braggy moment, I don't like to brag about stuff generally, but I feel like we have had a really good set of guests over our sort of young life, and we're only 5 months in. From Laurie Cantor, our first guest, Paul McGinley, Dottie Pepper was great. Roberto Castro, was brilliant. Mike Lorenzo Vera, I still think is probably my favorite one, and Ryan's great. So, and I don't want to tease too much because nothing's 100% confirmed, but we have got a couple of very big names on the docket for later this year, so I'm excited about those as well.
Yeah, I mean, the word superstar was a bit of a buzzword last week, Sam. If I was going to say if we pull this off, if you pull this off, we are talking superstars here. So, big deal. But anyway, how was the weekend otherwise? I mean, we don't want to waste too much time. We've got Scotland to talk about and a few news items and all sorts.
We've got a lot to talk about. No, it was a nice weekend, but I really want to hear your Bernhard Langer story because you said you had one, and I need to know what this is.
I've been worrying about this because I don't think it's going to come across as well as it does when we are in the pub, me and my colleagues, as that happens once a year. But and this all came up because of a thing we might talk about in a bit, where Liv released a podcast where the CEO was scrutinised by one of his own members of staff. So that was fun. But it made me think of a time about 15 years ago. And look, there might be some urban legend involved here, and events may have changed during the course of the last 15 years. But we had an interview lined up. It probably was Dave Tyndall who'd arranged it. We used to be in the same office. And he got an interview with Bernhard Langer. But Dave was off that day, whatever had happened. And this is back in the day when people did these things over the phone. And Bernhard Langer rang the office. And one of the sort of football journalists sort of picked the phone up and was like, Bernhard Langer? Anybody? Bernhard Langer's on the phone. And there was no one there to answer that call. So Bernhard said something along the lines of, well, I'm not doing the accent. Dave has emailed me the questions. I have them in front of me. Would you like me to just read them to myself and you can record it? Because it was for a written interview. And this football journalist said, yeah, great. Popped into one of the little studio booths we had, press record. So then you've got this situation where Bernhard Langer's going, so Bernhard, what did you in the final round of the Masters? Well, Bernhard. And that is genuinely something that happened around 15 years ago, where Bernhard Langer interviewed Bernhard Langer. Still probably gave himself a harder time and some more difficult questions than Live employee gives boss. But there we are.
So, Bernhard, can you discuss whether or not you're anchoring the putter?
Well, Bernhard,
maybe nothing that tough.
You asked that. No, I am not. Well, Bernhard. Yeah, great. Bernhard Langer, everybody.
Well, before we move on to our review of last week's events, there is one thing I did want to say, which is that I'm following in your footsteps, Ben, and I'm going to France on a golfing holiday this weekend.
Lovely.
Yes,
Lovely.
Not the same area of France.
Okay.
I'm going to Lyon, so a bit further south. And it's with my best man. So it's a friend of mine I've known since we were 12 years old. He lives in Dubai. He's recently caught the golf bug. and he was like, "We need to go on a golf trip." And I said, "Yeah, let's meet halfway." So we're going to France.
So he's only recently caught the golf bug, and already he's doing golf holidays. I
yes,
admire that. I admire
I know,
that.
me too. I mean, I say recently. I mean, I'm talking maybe 3-4 years, but given that he went for his whole 20s and 30s without touching a golf club, and then his 40s, he's like, it's time. So yeah,
I need to
I'm
ask the question:
excited.
does he listen to Slice, Sam? I mean, never mind. Does he go on golf trips from time to time? Let's leave it there.
Yeah,
Surely on the flight over, the least he can do. Anyway,
right. Into last week's event. So we'll start DP World Tour, BMW International Open, and Dan Brown was victorious. Now, Ben, I didn't watch any of the final round, unfortunately, because we had relatives over from America, so we spent the day with them, and I didn't see any of it. But can you talk me through what you watched and Dan Brown's impressive win?
well, now I suppose we've got some more context which we can talk about. But it was amazing to watch, really. I mean, obviously, my interest is usually coloured. Well, if it's not a bad week and they've all missed the cut, my interest is coloured by selections. And I had Hughes Loughton start the final round in third place, and Davis Bryant started in fourth. And thankfully, by the end of it, they were just about in those positions. But obviously, you're hoping for a chance, just for the door to be left open. And without being rude to Jordan Smith, he's a fabulous player, but you feel like you might have a chance there, because I think we'd all agree that he's probably just a couple of wins short of where someone who hits it as well as he does perhaps should be. And I say that with hesitation because I know how hard it is. And Dan Brown, I was on Dan Brown when he led the SDC Championship last March at 66-1, and he was hopeless in the final round. So I thought there might be a bit of a sniff here. And Loughton holed out from about 100 yards on the fifth, I think it was, and got within a couple. But the story of those first 9 holes was basically those two went blow for blow, holing putts from everywhere. I think Dan Brown holed 2 20-footers the first 3 holes. Jordan Smith had a fantastic week with the putter, which bodes well. He has actually been putting quite well for a while. And it'll be a frustrating chance miss for him. But Dan Brown was absolutely extraordinary. And we subsequently discover, and I think you might have the quote here for anyone who's not come across this, that a friend of his passed away, I think, as recently as last week. So enormous credit to him for, overcoming that and doing something to, pay tribute to his friend, I suppose, which he referenced after. He was very emotional afterwards, and understandably
Yeah.
so.
Well, I saw it. So the first thing I saw about this actually was on his Instagram on the Saturday after the round, and he said something along the lines of, "I'll be trying my heart out for you tomorrow, Lou, his friend." And I thought, oh, what's happened? Something had obviously happened. I didn't know whether it's necessarily a death or whatever, or someone who's ill, but I thought there's going to be some obviously inspiration in a kind of weird way. Inspiration can come from different sources, can't it? But yeah, in his press conference afterwards, he said, the last 2 days I've been thinking about him, trying to take my mind off it. Obviously, trying not to get too emotional in the process. But then he says, I don't know, I'm not too sure what happened today. Like, it was an out of body experience. And that reminded me very much of Eric Van Rooyen in Mexico, the year before last, where he made similar comments. I think he just said, he was playing for something that was greater than himself. And of course, we didn't know about this in the run up to the tournament. We often don't. But when you get something like that happens, it can elevate someone's game. And it's these very small margins that make the difference in professional golf. Even Ryan Fox mentioned it, didn't he? He said, I mean, we were talking about President's Cup, weren't we? But whether it's something that you're chasing or something that you're maybe feeling angry about, or whatever it is, there's all these little things that can play into a performance like that. And obviously Dan Brown has made the best of obviously a bad experience. So
Yeah, well said. And look, PGA Tour in a different way. We had a guy who has been struggling a bit and went back to Illinois, where he went to college, and had loads of friends and family with him, and he's gone and won. And look, there's a confirmation bias to it inherently, isn't there? Because we can't know everything. There will be other players who've had, the DP World Tour membership's 200 men from the age of 20 to 60. Every year, there's going to be ones who are experiencing really difficult things, and a lot, most of the time, it won't have a positive impact on their performance. But in this particular case, I would suggest that for Dan Brown, he happened to play well last week because golf, and then on Sunday, it helped him. And obviously, the most important thing here is that it sounds like someone's lost their life, and there'll be a family and friends, and Dan Brown's one of them. It's just way more important than anything we can talk about.
Yeah.
But it's got to be of comfort, hopefully, to that family, and certainly for Dan Brown, it might help him. And there was definitely something different about him yesterday. I mean, the shot he hit to the par 5 early on, he's just gone straight at the flag, And he said on the 18th as well, I think Tim Barter asked him, did you think about laying up? You had a cushion, and he sort of talked about what had happened the year before and how Jordan Smith had set up an eagle chance against Ewan Ferguson that he didn't convert. But he just, it was his day, and a million different things collided to make it his day. And it's great timing for him, away from what's happened in his personal life, because obviously we've got his return to the Open coming up. And last year he was a bit of a sort of unsung hero of the Open, sort of smoking cigarettes down the side of the fairway while trying to process all that, being in the mix. And yeah, really, really impressive performance. That's 2 DP World Tour wins now. The one thing I want to say, again, removing all that other stuff, he's not very consistent, but I think since he won, I think he's got 5 top 5s in about 40 odd starts. So when he is on a good week, he tends to really make it pay, and that's a really good quality to have. Again, more extreme version of that on the PGA Tour last week. But Dan Brown has really stuck around when he gets a sniff, and good on him for that.
Will you allow me to do a ridiculous analogy about Jordan Smith, Ben?
I love ridiculous analogies, so please.
Okay, so a couple of weeks ago, I was playing Mario Kart with my kids. Right,
I love it already. Yeah,
and
it's
my
easier
daughter,
when you're behind, right? Is that the
not quite that? But my daughter, my 12-year-old daughter, said something which I sort of thought this is ridiculous what she said. But then I thought about it some more, and I was like, okay. She said, "Oh, this game really annoys me because I always do really well on the laps that don't count." And I thought, all the laps count, right? But she's sort of looking in the way that only the last lap counts because that decides where you finish. And I'm thinking, is that Jordan Smith on the DP World Tour? Now, to be fair, he played well yesterday. It's not like he didn't play well, but he keeps getting pipped to the post, and it just feels like he's sort of, he keeps, turtles keep flying at him on the final round.
Yeah, it does. It's a really good analogy, actually. It's a great sort of sports psychology point, isn't it? And I'm sure, most Bob Rotella, whoever else, a lot of what they talk about, I imagine, will be the fact that really, it's, in the end of the day, it's who hits the ball the fewest times in 72 holes, right? So what I think one of Bob Rotella's things is you can never get the shot back. I think that's one of his things. Like if you drop a shot to the third and you birdie the fourth, you didn't get your shot back from the third. You can't. You've hit the ball 5 times and that's it. But yeah, look, he did make back-to-back bogeys in the early stage of the back 9 yesterday, which definitely sort of made it easier for Dan Brown. Now it may just be that Jordan Smith had a sort of unstoppable force against him yesterday, but he did make back-to-back mistakes, and you'd have liked him to not do that, right? But if he keeps putting as well as that, it's a bit of a cliche, but if he keeps putting above average, which he's been doing, I think one will fall his way, right? Whether or not, and he's probably still learning, still improving, and he's a really good player. And I have to say, I mean, I know this is not unique to the DP World Tour by any means, but he could not have been warmer in his congratulations of Dan Brown on the 18th green. I'm sure he'd have known what the situation was there, and he had a smile on his face.
Yeah.
Some things are more important than whether you finish first or second, right? And in that moment, he was really magnanimous. Yeah,
definitely. On to the PGA Tour. So John Deere Classic, we mentioned a little bit already, but Brian Campbell won in the playoff, single hole against Emiliano Grillo. And yeah, like you say, is a more extreme example of Dan Brown in many ways, because he's won twice this season. He's had 9 missed cuts, and apart from that, his best finish is 32nd. So, in terms of making those good weeks count, he's the epitome of that. I mean, it's quite amazing, really. And this course was definitely on paper more suited to him than in Mexico or anyone. But yeah, he's clearly he hits the ball very straight. He's a good putter. These kind of low scoring tests where you don't necessarily need to hit the ball a mile is a good formula for him. And I wanted to ask you, Ben, should he? I think I already know your answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Should he be in the Ryder Cup conversation?
Well, I hope so. No, he should be nowhere near that conversation, Sam. He wouldn't be in the top 80 picks, I don't think. And that's not disrespectful to Brian Campbell. He's just not as good at golf, unfortunately, as at least 80 other Americans. So, no, I think it'd be a bit silly. I had this debate with Jason Sobel, who I respect, this morning. And it's a fair one that, that question should be put to Keegan Bradley to explain why not. Keegan won't answer. He won't say, well, because he's just not good enough, because that would be seen as disrespectful. And I don't intend to be disrespectful. He's just won twice on the PGA Tour. It's an incredible achievement for a player who hits it 270 off the tee. It's nuts to win twice. But there's no way on earth he should be anywhere near that conversation. And I really don't care if he wins again. He's just not of that caliber, I'm afraid. And if you priced him up against Jon Rahm in the singles at Bethpage, I think you'd have to go like 1-4 Jon Rahm. And we're talking, okay, your other options here: Jon Rahm against Patrick Cantlay, 8-11 Jon Rahm. Jon Rahm against Tony Finau, okay, maybe 8-13. It's just non-starter, Sam. He's the new Martin Trainer, right? You can bookmark this. Martin Trainer won once or twice, right? Because people win golf tournaments, and some people win twice, some people win 0 times, and it doesn't tell us anything about them. Martin Trainer won a couple of times, and then for about 10 years, every time he got near the lead, we had to read on Twitter, oh, Martin Trainer's, he probably is the one to beat here because he's really gutsy. It's like he's not as good as the others at golf. I'm sorry, that's the most important thing that determines what will happen in the future. And look, we've joked about Martin Trainer shooting about 100 over recently. I'm not saying Brian Campbell will do that, and I have massive respect. I'm being silly, but I just want to make a really important point on this, though, right? In Mexico, he hit it out of bounds and it came back in, right? If he didn't come back in, he's lost. And yesterday, he hit a duck hook on the 15th tee, right? And ended up making double. And he's lucky that Emiliano Grillo 3-putted the same hole. And that's, after that, he hit some really good shots. He deserves loads of credit. But let's be real here. Final thing, Sam. I'm sorry. I've gone on far too long. We have to get used to this new world. There is not one PGA Tour where everything is equal. This is a bit like saying, right, should Josh, what's his surname, Josh Berry, be on the European Ryder Cup radar because he's won a couple of Challenge Tour titles? It's really not that far off being the same thing. The favourites last week were Ben Griffin and, whoever was second favourite, I don't remember. And the favourite in Mexico would have been someone like, I don't know, Steven Yeager was near the top of the market, wasn't he? I can't remember. Maybe Finau played. It's a different league, totally different league. And until he does something at the top level, like Ben Griffin's done, no chance.
So we need Brian Campbell to win a signature event before we can realistically look at him as a top caliber player.
Yes.
Right.
And the thing I really want to stress this point: don't assume next time you see him in the mix that he's up against someone who's not won, that Brian Campbell will therefore win because he's done it before. It's just not how it works. And don't get me wrong, he can get better. Like, he could learn from the mistakes he made yesterday, even in victory, can't he? But he's been really lucky and also really good. Those are the two things you need in golf to win.
Can we talk briefly before we move on to other
events?
Sam,
briefly.
Briefly. Yeah, sorry, this is true. About the world feed, because I've seen a lot of people that don't really like it, and I'm inclined to agree. I think so. If you've been watching Golf on Sky recently, I think it's been ever since the Players. I believe I'm correct in saying there's been this new world feed. So if you're outside the US, you get a different feed. And you kind of have this composite sort of US and European commentary team. And in some way, there's nothing against the commentators themselves who are doing a fine job, but it seems to sort of lack the gravitas that you get on the on the US coverage. And I think especially what I really noticed yesterday is when Brian Campbell was interviewed after. He was interviewed by Incy Mehmet, but obviously he'd already done the main interview with Amanda Balionis. And it sort of felt like it was just, the moment had passed by then. It's sort of like he's already done his main I don't know how, I haven't seen his one, his one with Amanda, but I'm guessing it was probably a more emotional and more of a kind of, this is immediately, it's just happened. And it feel like almost, you're on the sort of second rung. And it kind of feels unnecessary. Like we're not gaining anything by this sort of world feed. Now, I think the idea is that in the fullness of time, there'll be different feeds for different countries around the world. So there'll be a completely separate feed if you're in Japan, which focuses on Hideki Matsuyama and Ryo Hisatsune and people like that. If you're in Germany, you'll see Steven Jaeger and whoever else. But at that, obviously, we're not at that point yet. We've just got this single feed for the rest of the world. But what are your thoughts on it, Ben?
Yeah, it's hard to. I don't want to be rude because, the people who were doing it are perfectly decent at what they do. It's not, and you don't want to talk people out of jobs, right? But not that we'll have any influence in that. But we're not talking about something like trivial here or like a free service. People pay a lot of money to watch Sky Sports, and their price hasn't gone down, and they're now being given a secondary level service. It's not as good. And that in itself, I don't think is very fair. I think if ever you receive a worse service, there should be something in return for that. And it's hard to see what those positives are at the moment. I think if you gave people the choice, don't get me wrong, you'll have some who just can't stand listening to whoever on the US coverage. But if you gave people the choice, overwhelmingly they would choose to listen to the US coverage. It's by people who've been doing it for longer, and they've got the first. They're first in the queue, as you've alluded to. The biggest thing for me last night, it's like if you're going to give us this service, it has to be better than that, and it can actually be better than that. And the thing that really bugs me last night is that Brian Campbell's second in 17 came right after the ad break on Sky Sports, and it was Henny and Ollie Fisher. Ollie Fisher seems like a nice guy, but he's not been doing television for long. He's still trying to be a professional golfer, and he doesn't have a great deal of natural charisma for television. And between them, they really failed to get across to the viewer what a shot that was. The guy's playing a hole that like other people are 50 yards ahead of him, and he's hit it to 12 feet or something for eagle, and they just sort of went, "Oh, it's Brian Campbell. Yep, a good eagle chance." And it's like he's just gone favourite for the tournament because he's got a putt that will take him two clear. We have to get that. If you can't make it exciting on the 71st hole, what are we doing? It's got to be. And then the same thing happened. David Lipsky, we cut to David Lipsky and he missed the green. It was like, oh, that'll be a tricky up and down. It's like, that's a huge mistake David Lipsky's just made in the context of this tournament. And on the other feed, we'd have had someone saying, look, he's hit a really poor shot there under pressure. There was a big moment he had. He went to college in Illinois, biggest moment of his career, and he's hit a bad shot. But we don't get any of that. It's just sort of polite, like, oh yeah, good shot. And it fails to match the importance of the situation, I think.
I'd actually love to just see it clipped up, the kind of that moment, and then the two coverage, the world feed, and then the US coverage, just so we could see the stark difference in that moment. But you're right; those big moments of the tournament, they have to be lifted. It needs the right gravitas. It needs to improve, definitely. And I think most people, from what I've read, agree with this. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think, in answer to your question, in terms of the positives, I did a little bit digging on this, and the PGA Tour claim, at least, that you are seeing more shots on the world feed. I don't know if that's true or not. I assume it is, but it's that could be the only.
I didn't feel like it yesterday, but
no. Yeah.
But yeah, fair enough. But why can't we? I don't know. What they had before was we get the US service with the US commentary, and then we get a few extra ones thrown in, wouldn't we? Where there was some dude, another American, who just commentate on some other shots. On a Sunday that late, there should be no, oh, you're seeing more. We need to see certain shots. There's a minimum bar of shots we have to see. It just felt a little bit like we were watching people training, like learning to do it. And they all seem really nice. It's not a personal thing. Like, it's just, it's not as good as what we had before. So why should we be happy about that?
Right, I'm going to move us on, Ben, to a couple of other events of last week. So we'll start with the Interwetten Open. So Steinlechner won, second win of the season. Any comments on this? Brief? Must be brief.
No, Austrian wins in Austria. You know, he'd played really well in the DP World Tour event in Austria, so he's a very obvious winner on the Hotel Planet Tour, which there haven't been many of this year. So he's on his way to the DP World Tour now, 2 wins, and he's an exciting player. You know, Austria needs this next one. Bernd Wiesberger's 40 this year, I think. Matthias Schwab's struggling. Obviously, we've got Sepp Straka now carrying the torch on his own, but Steinleitner looks really good. Just wanting to mention Jovan Rebula, more famously known as Ernie Els' nephew. And I think there's been a sense that he's been a bit overrated because of that, but actually he was a very good amateur. He wasn't given anything as an amateur, and he's really starting to shine now as a pro, and I think he's going to win a tournament this year. So we'll see when that is. Hopefully.
Good one to look out for. Open final qualifying. You made some good calls in this, Ben, when we were talking about it last week, particularly Tedder from Estonia, first Estonian player to qualify for the Open, and did it in impressive fashion, holding out for eagle in a playoff. But yeah, any other sort of notable ones you wanted to call out from final qualifying?
No, not really. No, you know, the class sort of told in the end, and I'm glad players like Lucas Herbert are there. You know, he's a viable winner of the Open, isn't he? So, and Lee Westwood, you know, we joked about it last week, but this is one of my favourite golfers growing up. Someone we've all been there and hoped he can win an Open. I think that chance is probably gone, but you can never say never in the Open, and at least he's there, and he went to qualifying, he got it done, and you know, he's still very, very popular, and rightly so, and it was a heck of a performance. So yeah, Tedder's moment was just class, though, wasn't it? What a great thing to have captured on camera. It's great.
Yeah, so good. That's the best thing about qualifying for me, when you get the people who most people won't have heard of, and then qualifying with a shot like that, a moment like that, a celebration like that. It's cool. It's really cool, and that's one of the reasons I really want to go to final qualifying next year. The other events to talk about, so the Asian Tour is the International Series Morocco. Scott Vincent won. You may know here that he'd been in excellent form, and his brother Kieran won the week before last, so maybe some inspiration there. It was the KPMG Women's Irish Open on the Ladies European Tour, and Lottie Woad won, I believe, by 6 shots in the end. First amateur winner on the Ladies European Tour since June 2022. Only played one regular Ladies European Tour event before herself. I mean, she's a really impressive young player. I mean, amazing.
Yeah. We're obviously talking about. I mean, we knew this already, but I wonder what I didn't see. But I wonder what price she was last week. She will not have been a big price. But you know, this is easy to see LET, and obviously it is a lot weaker than the LPGA Tour. But Charlie Hull finished 4th, and I think Sagstrom was 2nd. These are Solheim Cup players. You know, they are proper players. So she's absolutely dusted them, and you know, she's the world #1 amateur. The sky's the limit, and it's been a really good time for young European golfers in the ladies' game. Mimi Rhodes, you know, already won a couple of times on the LET, and Ingrid Lindblad as well, out in the States, the Swede. So the future's bright. I mean, obviously, women's golf is so dominated by players from Asia. There's been a lot of talk about where's the next USA superstar. I mean, was it Rose Yang? You know, Nelly Cord has obviously been out there on her own the last couple of years, really. But Europe needs some more to follow Charlie and Georgia and Suzanne Pettersen and Nordqvist and Sorenstam before that. And it looks like we've got some coming, so that's really exciting.
Definitely, and one little note I'll say about her as well is that she finished tied 10th in the Women's Open last year, and I wonder, you know, that's not far away now. I could see her definitely being a factor. You know, going from an Irish Open to an Open, there's a lot of crossover there in terms of the conditions you'd expect. So, yeah, one to keep an eye on. Right, in the news, Ben, there's a few things to talk about here. So, firstly, I'll just mention the R&A announced this last chance qualifier, which will take place next year on Monday of the Open at Birkdale. And 12 players are going to be competing for a final place in the field. Again, I really like this. I like the idea that someone could, in theory, qualify on the Monday and then win the tournament, you know, on the Sunday. I don't know how they're going to pick the 12 players. I'm assuming it'll be the next 12 on the alternate list, but that hasn't been confirmed. But yeah, do you like this new idea by the R&A?
How much I like it depends entirely on who these 12 are. Right. And if there are any content creators, Sam, I'm out. I don't, and I include us in that. We have no business being there. No, I don't know who it's going to be, but presumably, yeah, you're right. It will be the alternates. Hopefully, it's Cam Davis, because I think twice in the last 3 or 4 years, he has been first alternate and spent all day on the grounds on the Thursday of the Open. I mean, he's probably in the Open this year, isn't he? But maybe not. He's been rubbish. Anyway, he spent all day on the grounds waiting to get in and hasn't got in to at least 2 of the last few. So hopefully he comes through the 12-man qualifier. But first he's going to have to be in it, and we'll see.
Next thing to talk about. So you alluded to this earlier on, but Rick Shields spoke to Live Golf CEO Scott O'Neill. Now, there were various talking points in here, but one of the main ones, will contracts be renewed, was mentioned. Does Liv get unfairly scrutinised? I think you enjoyed that one, didn't you, Ben? But of note, one thing that I thought was of note anyway, is he said he expects Liv to enter the women's game in the next 2 to 3 years. Now, this is potentially very big news, because as a lot of people will know, the ladies' game's got a lot less money in it. So suddenly, if you get a big player coming along, who's happy to pour obscene amounts of cash into the game, then you could see a lot of people taking that money, because it's not the same as in the men's game where you're already getting good money on the PGA Tour. There's much more of an incentive, I feel like, for some of the top ladies to move to this new entity, which presumably will happen if Liv is still around.
Yeah, I think the language was carefully chosen. I think entering the women's game probably in this case does not mean Live Golf Women's Edition. I think it probably means the sort of thing they're trying to do with the PGA Tour, and buying a seat at that table, and potentially, it's the Aramco LPGA Tour or whatever it is. Obviously, Aramco already a big part of the women's game. So who knows exactly what form it'll take? 2 to 3 years. That'll be what, 6 years after Liv began. So it's not happening quickly. I'd wonder why it's not happening more quickly. But no surprise. The question for me is what they see as the upside. There's definitely potential growth in the women's game, in terms of getting eyeballs on it and stuff. But I don't know to what extent Liv's involvement or the PIF's involvement will help with that. And, it will only invite further questions about the role women play in Saudi Arabian society and how that aligns with sponsoring a women's golf tour. So we'll see. But it's going to take a while, apparently.
Yeah, it will. Yeah. Next thing to mention, though, Dottie Pepper kindly forwarded me an email last week. So I think, we're friends now, me and Dottie. It's nice. But she sent me an email, forwarded an email from the LPGA board, I suppose. Dear players, I wanted to share a mid-year update on our pace of play policy. So obviously this was introduced, they were putting in some pretty harsh new rules on this. Since they put in these new rules, groups of 3 are playing 6 minutes faster, groups of 2 are playing 5 minutes faster. First rounds in group of 3 are 9 minutes faster, second rounds in 8 minutes faster, and basically there is an improvement. So this is good. I mean, it's not huge numbers, but it's moving in the right direction. So it does show that actually, if you start taking it seriously, then things will happen. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, and rightly so. It probably underlines the point that a lot of professional golfers have made, is that there is kind of a ceiling on how much you can do with 3 balls. Yeah. As I think you said last week to Ryan, actually, that 2 balls is the one thing we know is going to really speed things up. There's kind of a cap on, you got that many golfers on the course, you got to move them around it. Penalties can only do a little bit of that job. And does 9 minutes on a round of golf make a material difference to a viewer? Probably not. But action, sometimes you just need to be seen to be taking action, and that actually that satisfies the viewer that you're doing what you can, and it seems like the LPGA are, so good on them for that.
Yeah, definitely. Last thing to mention before
I sound like Saved by the Bell or something.
Last thing to mention before I move on to the world of golf this week. So it was just announced this morning that Billy Foster is going to be on the bag for Collin Morikawa, both this week and next. So obviously Scottish Open and the Open Championship. And I got to say, Ben, I don't know what your thoughts on this, but my immediate thought was this seems like an odd pairing. Like Collin Morikawa seems like someone who needs sort of like a yes man on the bag, and Billy Foster is possibly as far away as you can go from a yes man. Like I can see
maybe that's not what Collin Morikawa needs, I guess.
Maybe.
I'm going to do something unprecedented here, Sam, and I'm actually going to leave the screen area because my dog, I mean, this is live radio for you. My dog is completely pounding the door down. All I have to do is open the door. So I'm going to do that next time you
Okay.
talk. So I'm laying the ground for that. But yeah, I mean, Billy won't take any nonsense. But Matt Fitzpatrick sometimes is a bit sulky, right? I think he can get a bit down on himself, and maybe maybe there's something there. It's only 2 weeks, isn't it? We'll see. I did want to say one thing on Colin Morikawa. We gave him some stick a few weeks ago, me in particular. Deserved stick, I think. But I was reading some quotes from Max Homer last week. Was it Max Homer? Might have been someone else who was saying Colin Morikawa rings him all the time to see how he's going, and he's been struggling with his game and just always checking in, always offering advice. Got to give credit where it's due. That's if I was a professional golfer, I'd want a friend like that. So just because his attitude with the media is not always great, it doesn't mean we know everything about him. I'm gonna let the dog in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is a fair point, and he's sort of easy to poke fun at because of his how he's been in front of the media lately. But yes, you're very right to point out the good side of him as well. And again, I'm not an LAGC fan for no reason, Ben, as I've said before.
always getting that you're obsessed with the TGL. Is that what it's called?
Right, World of Golf this week. So big event. PGA, there's 2 events, 2 co-sanctioned events this week. The most notable, of course, is the Scottish Open. And I just want to say, I've been at the Scottish Open the last two years. I really like it as an event, and I really like co-sanctioned events generally. I love how how is Luke Clanton going to get on a sort of faux links Scottish course, right? And likewise, how is Yannick De Bruyne going to play on a sort of Parkland track in Kentucky? I think I love that. It's just something we don't see that often, and if someone like us, we follow these DP World Tour players, week in, week out, and suddenly they're thrown into this completely different environment. It'll be interesting to see how they stack up against their sort of counterparts on the US side.
Yeah, it really will. When we were talking a couple of weeks ago about Adrian Sadier there, weren't we, in the ISCO Championship a couple of years ago? It's really annoying that they've moved the course for the ISCO. It's really annoying. Although there should be an element of me that's pleased, because last year, I'm going to moan for a second. Last year I had Rico Hoey, who just needed to make a par on 18 to win, and he had a wedge with his second shot and he hit it in the water. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. The year before, I had Trevor Cohn at 125 to 1, who was 1 or 2 shots clear playing the 16th, and it was a par 3, pulled it 30 yards left, made bogey or double bogey, missed the playoff by a shot. And the year before that, I had Matty Schmidt, who went to college in Kentucky, 80 to 1. Led going into the final round, shot 77, missed the places by a shot. So Keen Trace has not been nice to me. It's been cruel. So I should be glad to get out of there. But the thing is, it was so easy to profile what sort of golfer is suited to that golf course. This one, short, par 70, on paper, it's a lot different. But it's also probably an improvement, and there's going to be more fans. So it's all positive, really, I think.
Well, the notable thing I think that I've picked out here is that it was renovated by Keith Foster, and I talked about him, if you remember, when we were talking about the Truist Championship, because he renovated Philadelphia Cricket Club, and he also renovated Colonial. Now, Philadelphia Cricket Club, we can't really draw any comparisons for who might do well, because of course that was a signature event and no one is in the field, or basically no one will be in the field this week who played Philadelphia Cricket Club. But Colonial could be potentially, something to look at. I mean, that's as good as I've got really for this week. Par 70, who was redesigned by the same person.
Very similar yardage, very similar aesthetic. This is sometimes we say tree lined, and it can mean a lot of different things. But these are mature trees. I've done the flyover. It's but it looks. I've read conflicting reports. Some people seem to be saying it will still be a big hitter. There are some very short holes. The par fives will both be very easy. I think it'll be quite low scoring. But it's a smorgasbord of a field, isn't it? So it's going to be a fun.
Yeah.
Like you, Sam. The opportunity to look at something that is weaker and has more unknowns is a welcome one.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder, obviously the course has changed, as we talked about, but the recipe feels like the last few years, or at least 3 of the last 4 years, a European player who actually plays on the PGA Tour. So,
Right.
we've had, Harry Hall last year, Vincent Norman the year before, and then, 2 years before that, Seamus Power. These European players, but they don't play on the DP World Tour. So
Which
that's
leads
why
you to
Christopher Ventura, Ben.
Good detective work.
Having taken inspiration from the play of Brighton lately, and obviously Victor Hovland winning earlier on in the year. I think he could be the one this week. But
good stuff. I like that. I guess it's a very us that we've not actually talked about the Scottish Open.
No,
Are we doing that at fantasy time, or do you want to do a word on it now?
You can talk a little bit about it now. Yeah, go on.
Well, just a couple of things, really. It's still at the Renaissance. They've tried to make it more linksy and tougher, and it's worked. Forecast is really good this week, though, so it might be slightly easier. A couple of sort of notable things for me. One, it does seem like not often do we say links golf, oh, you need to be a big hitter. It does seem like big hitters is the way here. Like, even some of the surprise packages here. Alejandro Del Rey was like 15th last year. Nicholas Norgard was about the same. Kurt Kitayama nearly won it. Just loads of really big hitters. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but it seems to be the case. And the other thing is, not really surprising, but the PGA Tour has been utterly dominant. Last year, in each of the last 3 years, one player has hit the places in each year who has not had a PGA Tour card. Romain Langasque, believe it or not, the year before was Bob McIntyre, and the year before that was Jamie Donaldson. So if you are looking at these massive, you're going to get like 400 to 1 about guys you've been backing at 50 to 1 in the BMW International Open. If you find the right one, it's great, but I wouldn't go, relying on the home contingent personally.
Yeah, that's a definitely a good call out, and I think part of that comes down to the fact that it's not a true links. It's a sort of it's not quite that style where you really need to adapt your game that much. It's still got that slight target element to it. It's kind of halfway there, but that's the reason you see people like JT Poston has done well. Ben An, was up there the year before last. It's I agree. You want to find a big hitter who's come off the PGA Tour, maybe has a little bit of experience playing, or has played a little bit of links golf, maybe played a few opens. But yeah, I wouldn't get too hung up on finding someone like a Scott Jamieson or someone like that. It's just not gonna be like that. I'll take us on, Ben, to the LPGA Tour because it's a major week. It's the Amundi Evian Championship, and I've had a little look at this. So I think we've both been honest about this. That we feel like we're slightly we don't quite have the knowledge there when it comes to the ladies' game. I'm trying to be better with this, especially with the majors. And I've done a little bit of digging into recent Evian Championships, and here's a little stat for you. Okay, so bogey avoidance on the LPGA Tour. Okay, last year across the season, the leader in bogey avoidance was Fruet, who won this event last year. The year before, Boutier, she ranked first in bogey avoidance over the course of the season. The year before that, Brooke Henderson ranked fourth in bogey avoidance over the course of that season. Which leads me to this year. A few of the people who are up there, Hugh Kim, who was tied 12th in this event last year, might be worth a look. Rio Takeda, who's been playing well lately, she shot a 66 on her debut in the first round. She ended up not doing that great, but there's at least a little bit of course form there. And Angel Yin is his third in that stat, and then Fruet herself fourth, and then fifth is Haijin Choi, who I think could be maybe a little an outsider worth looking at. So
good stuff. Yeah. Good stuff. Duly noted.
Yes. The other events, just to rattle us through them. So the Hotel Planet Tour, again, let's mention our newsletter because Ben will do a little preview of this. It's the D&D Real Check Challenge. Any comments on that, or are you going to leave it for the newsletter?
I'll just say that this is basically a pitch and putt course, and we'll try and do some more digging in time for the newsletter. It's like 6,300 yards, and the winner shot 28 under last year. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is short. I'd fancy my chances of shooting 90, maybe. No, probably not.
I feel like it'd be a good course to go and have a crack at breaking a personal best score. But yeah, Benjamin Follett-Smith, who you mentioned last week. So that's back-to-back weeks with a mention of Zimbabwe's third best golfer here on Sliced. But yeah, he won it 28 under last year. I think it's got an inherently volatile look to it because when it's that easy and it's that short, you can't really rule a lot of players out. So
yeah. The Corn Ferry Tour is in Colorado for the Ascendant. I did a little bit of looking at this actually, very, very briefly. Seemed to maybe a little bit of crossover with the Astara Golf Championship. Del Solar won the Ascendant last year, and I think he was fifth at the Astara. And there's a couple other names who were in the top 10 who'd done well there. So maybe worth looking at. That's as far as I've gone with it. But I quite like when the tours go to places like Colorado. You don't see that often, and you kind of generally have sort of elevation and other factors that you don't get elsewhere.
Totally,
nice
Peter Quest will be popular. He'll be playing. He won't have done anything for a year, and he'll open 150 to 1. He'll be back to 66 to 1. There's your prediction. I've not looked at the field. I don't know if this is true, but there'll be loads of players with Colorado connections, won't there? Maybe the Summer Haze lads are going to turn up. Maybe Preston or Boyd's there. Boyd won't be. He's like 50, but Preston, maybe. Who knows?
Maybe. Last event is Live Andalusia, which of course is at Valderrama. And so, notably Sergio Garcia's got an excellent record there. So he could be one to look at. But obviously a stunning golf course. And that's sort of all I've got to say about that one. So unless you have any comments, Ben,
No, not really. It just feels like you're being cheated on a little bit, doesn't it? It's just Valderrama on Live. It just doesn't feel right. But
it's a shame. I do miss that course on the DP World Tour. But it is what it is. Player tracker. So both Elvis and Angel were in action last week. They finished 38th and 49th respectively. So not a great week, but for Elvis at least, there were some signs of a little bit of an uptick in form. I'll be honest, I haven't actually double checked whether they're in the field this week on either side of the pond, which is not very good for someone who's supposed to be tracking their progress. Do you know, Ben?
Elvis is in Scotland. Angel is in Kentucky. So
that's interesting because, on paper you'd expect it to be the other way around, would you not? Or maybe not.
I think Elvis gets in because he won the Aussie Open.
Okay.
He'd presumably be higher up the rest of Dubai, wouldn't he? I don't know. We should know this, Sam. But Angel is in Kentucky, and unless it does play like Keen Trace, he probably would have preferred it to have stayed put. But he's ticking along nicely. We've got some events. It's that August, September, sort of a little gap of some small events. August, September time is what we're looking at. So let's work towards the win there.
Okay. All right. Fantasy update. So we actually have a new leader, Ben. So David Moran is now leading overall. Garvin Howarth is in second. So Lewis Blaine.
Welcome to Lewis Blaine.
He's back in, I think, third or fourth. I know.
Wow.
Yeah. Could I get your 6 picks, Ben, or do you want me to go first?
I'll go. So I'm going to go the 3 Danes, 2 Højgaard twins, and a Nygaard Peterson. I would have considered Nicholas Norgard, but his wife's expecting any minute. So she may have had the baby by now. I don't know, but she is expecting. That's why he hasn't played since the US Open. So I've got 3. I've got Nygaard Peterson, Nikolai, and Rasmus. 2 PGA Tour members. 1, I think, will be by the end of the year. And then for the others, we're going to go Xander Schauffele, who is a bit of a form concern, but past champion. Yeah. Robert McIntyre, very boring, another past champion. But I've not used Bob maybe once actually. And then Adam Scott, who was runner-up to McIntyre last year. I think Scott's quite interesting this week. He's hit the ball last 2 starts as well as he's hit it for about 18 months. Obviously, we've got that big question mark. Can he get over the line again? It's been a while, but
I quite like that actually. I hadn't really properly considered him, but of course, the last time we saw him, I believe, was the US Open. Has he played since then?
Then he shot at 62 in the 3rd round of the Travellers, finished mid-pack, but his ball striking was really good again. So I think he's feeling good. Yeah, we'll see.
Maybe you might have talked me into making a late change for my fantasy game, but for now I'll stick to it, to what I've got. I'm joining you. So I've actually been a bit more tactical this week, Ben. Normally I'm a bit sort of not scattergun, but I'm normally like, I look at who's in form and and that sort of thing. But this time I'm like, Xander Schauffele, this is the time to play him in the DP World Tour fantasy game because he's not going to play many times. So
you got this week and next week are your only options, aren't they? So,
exactly. So you might as well use him if you think he's good, and he obviously is a past champion, like you say. So he's my captain. Bob McIntyre, obvious, but why not? I don't necessarily think he'll defend his title, but I'd be surprised to see him outside the top 20. Tommy Fleetwood, he's got a great record here. 3 of his last 5 starts, he's been in the top 6, and he's playing well. So slightly surprised you haven't got him, Ben, unless you're saving him for other events later in the year. But I like him. Ludwig Oberg. Now his form has been sort of hard to really get a real grasp on this year, but he's a 36 hole leader last year. I remember I was up there. I remember watching him and watching a bit of his round, and he was playing really, really well. And he's one of those players who, in calm conditions, particularly, he could really tear this place apart. So I like him. And then the last two, maybe slightly more outside the box, but not massively. Aaron Rai, past champion, and he feels like he's sort of steadily rounding into form here. And then Matt Fitzpatrick, I'm gonna have a go because he is a previous runner-up in this event, and again, it feels like he's possibly turning a corner with his game. Certainly, the last few weeks, his ball striking stats have been improved. And I will say, actually, I initially had Morikawa as one of my picks, and I took him out in light of the caddie news because I don't think it's going to work.
Wow, I like that bullish statement.
Yep.
A lot of people will go the other way, won't they? I think we'll see some people siding with Morikawa, hoping that Billy Foster is the missing piece of the jigsaw. Doesn't often happen, does it? I sort of feel like these temporary, high-profile caddy switches, like they don't. I don't know. I share your thoughts. Really, I'm slightly concerned that it might not help.
Yeah, well, we will see. But right. Are you ready for this, Ben?
Of course.
It's the highest bidder. It's the highest bidder. It's the highest bidder. It's the highest bidder.
It's just become part and parcel, hasn't it? Now it's like it's been there since the start.
What I like about it is it gives me a chance to actually look it up on my phone, so we don't have that awkward pause where I actually try and find the question. So I can do that while it's playing. I will say, highest bidder wise, that we do need some new topics to be submitted. So if you have any good ideas, please DM us on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or whatever, or email us slidesgolfpodcast@gmail.com. Don't just tweet us normally, because then I could see it and then it'll be in my mind and then I could potentially cheat, which I don't want to do. But once you've seen something, you can't unsee it. Right.
On that, Sam, we are hoping we've got more giveaways coming up. I'll keep this very brief, but I'm hoping during the Open to get a few copies of Joel Beale's book. So providing that all goes to plan, Joel's got to bring them with him from the States, and then someone's got to get them to me. It could go horribly wrong. If we get our hands on those copies of what I'm sure is a fabulous book, we'll give one away to the best, highest bidder category that we get between now and the end of July. So send in your categories and we'll pick one that's the best.
That's a good way of doing it, Ben. Let's sort of incentivize people to send stuff in rather than just ask them to. Sometimes people need an incentive in life.
They do.
Yes. Right. We have a topic in from Inkblot Sports, Philip Myers. I think he gave us a tough one last time, if I remember. But the topic is the 17 continental Europeans who have European Tour wins on home soil back to 2010. So we've had 17 continental Europes who have won on the DP World Tour. Oh, on home soil, so on their own turf.
All right. I've got a number. If you want one.
Continental Europeans.
Don't look at the screen, Sam, until you're ready.
Okay, I'm not going. I feel like I need to start. I've got 4 here. Okay, yeah. I guess I can't compete with this, Ben. I can't. I'm just, yeah.
Look, there's a good chance you get to come in here and swoop, right? Because I could get this wrong, but Joost Luiten has most certainly won the KLM Open, right?
Yeah.
This is since 2010, isn't it?
2010, yeah.
Thomas Levey won the Open de France in about 2012, beat Torbjorn Olesen. So that's good.
Yeah.
Luiten, Levey, Francesco Molinari, who famously
won the Italian Open, did he?
Won the Italian Open. Yeah. Yes. Was it Continental Europeans? It was, wasn't it? Oh, no. I was going Eddie Pepperell next, but he's... okay. Alexander Nuren, who definitely won the Nordea Masters at least twice, I would suggest. So I'm on 4.
Good.
And now I begin to struggle.
Okay.
But you'll bear with me, won't you?
Yeah, of course.
So we haven't had any Belgians in Belgium. That's definitely not happened. We must have had Spaniards in Spain. We've had loads of those. So Angel Hidalgo.
Yeah. Nice,
Rafa,
nice,
I
yeah.
feel like I might have cracked it just by going to Spain here.
You may have done.
Rafa Cabrera Bello,
Yeah.
Sergio Garcia.
Yeah.
I've got the 7 now, but I just had to get to Spain, didn't I?
Very good. Yeah, Spain. Spain is the you crack the code.
Adrianos, that was another one in Spain. ISPS. I just want to do loads more, Sam. But
It's a good performance, Ben. I'm just sort of wondering about Germany. Did Keimer win in Germany?
He did win the BMW International Open, but I'm thinking that might have been in like 2008. And he said 20 times, right? I was thinking about Germany. I was thinking whether Marcel Siem won the Paul Lawrie match play, but I don't think he did. I think Otegi might have won it when it was in Germany.
I mean, unfortunately, I don't have the answers for this, so I can't reel off what we're missing here.
Well, we got a lot of them there. We got a lot of them.
Yeah. Wait, well, you did.
Well, I did. I've gone to Italy. It's not Portugal's definitely not one of them. What continental European countries am I missing? I mean, there's loads of them. But where else could we have gone to? Poland. We've not been there yet on the DP World Tour. There's got to be a few more Spaniards. They win every year, don't they? In Spain, Spaniards in Spain.
No Austrians in Austria.
Well, I wonder whether Bernd Wiesberger had won the Lioness, but I don't think he did. No. He might have done. Use definitely won that, but I don't know.
Danes? Any Danes in Denmark?
Danes in Denmark, I thought about that. I couldn't think of one. Torbjorn definitely hasn't. Søren Kjeldsen hasn't.
The Højgaards haven't?
No. Oh, Rasmus, yeah, he won the Made in Himmerland, didn't he?
That was one that I was going to guess. Like, I mean, I couldn't actually remember, but I was going to guess.
Good one, that. Don't think we've had any Norwegians in Norway. There's probably another Swede, is there? Maybe. Although there's not many.
Well, so Inkblot did actually say Lynn Grant doesn't count because obviously she won, a sort of co-sanctioned event, if you like, a mixed team event, didn't she?
Trying to remember who did Stenson win the Scandinavian mix? I don't think he did. Someone. Alex Bjork hasn't. No. Anyway, we got enough, but I feel like that's one where you can get all of them. I don't think there's another Frenchman. Obviously,
I'm nearly running out of space, Ben. By the way, on this board here. I mean, God knows how many points you're on, but you can see that there's not much left. And I mean, some will ask the question. I'm not asking the question, but some will ask the question: is this too one-sided, and should the format be looked at for next season, next year?
I would be the wrong person to ask because I'm having a hell of a time. I thought I might stumble there, but look, I got to Spain. I had to get to Spain. I got there, so yeah.
Well, thank you to Inkblot Sports for an excellent category there. It was very good. I again would encourage people to send in, and not just send in any old category. Try and send one in that I might do well at. Okay. Maybe like I don't know what that is though. That's the problem. Aces at Sawgrass was the one I did well at. I can't really think of other ones along those lines.
I'd be useless at that. So there you go. Yeah, we've all got our areas.
We do. Right. Okay. So we're running out of time in our podcast, but as Ben mentioned at the top of the podcast, please have a listen to Ryan Fox episode if you haven't. It is a great episode, if I do say so myself. Please do leave ratings and reviews, which always massively help us in sort of growing the podcast. Please also sign up to our newsletter. It's pinned it's pinned on Twitter and on Instagram and Facebook. And apart from that, all that remains to be said is we will see you next week.